What's up, guys? Adam back in with the RV Returners. This time we're coming in with another deck tech. I know we've haven't really done anything other than the podcast for a little bit. We've been kind of busy between like streaming tournaments and holiday season and stuff, and spending time with family. So we want to get back on the grind though. We want to have out a pretty good amount of videos before the reunion kicks off. Probably mostly just these deck techs. So first off, I wanted to start off with a deck that I made that I've been playing at locals for a little bit that has kind of piqued some people's interest. I've been having a lot of fun with it. It's not like the best deck in the meta or anything like that, but it can hang. It does have trouble in some matchups, but the deck I'm talking about is the Final Fantasy XIII 3-color monster deck that I've been playing. So let's go ahead and look at the list really quick, and I'll kind of give a quick breakdown of how it works, and then we'll go through each card and kind of like why it's in there, what it does, you know, the purpose it serves, all that stuff. So if we just look at the deck right quick, it's pretty weird. It doesn't run any summons, obviously, but if you look, we have a Cleone in there. We have 3, actually. So the object is kind of get that down once you start building a board so that your opponent can't cast summons either. So it doesn't really matter that you don't have any summons in your deck. You know, really the key part of this deck is you're playing a lot of Final Fantasy XIII characters to abuse the new Sarah legend, and then you're using them to lock people down. So let's go ahead and look at each card individually and like why it's there and what it's going to do. So first, if we look at the forwards, up is Leo. Honestly, he's pretty cuttable right now. He does help you in color fixing, and he can get pretty big if you build up a lot of your monsters. But other than that, most of the time I find myself pitching him for Earth CP to play other cards. Instead of actually playing on the board. I used to run 2 at the beginning, but now I'm only running 1. He can be searched out by a card we'll talk about later, which kind of merits him only being here as a 1-of now. But I do think this card is super cuttable, and you could probably cut him for, you know, a 3-of a couple cards down the list that we'll talk about. Then we got Mira, another Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles character, and she's actually really good in this deck. So anytime a monster is put from the field to the break zone, we're going to be able to dull her. She can do this the turn she comes out, and search our deck for a monster of the same name. We're going to abuse that with some monsters that we'll talk about later. It also reduces the cost of our monsters by 1. A lot of our monsters cost 2, so being able to pay 1 for those monsters is going to be really relevant once you get out backups. And then we have some other monsters, really just 1 that costs 4, and that costing 3 actually is kind of a big deal. So other than that, yeah, she's pretty strong. I think 2-of is the right call here. You could maybe up it to 3, but I think 2 is just fine. Then we have Realm. She's a card that you see in like pretty much any monster deck that plays water, basically. She allows you to look at the top 5 and grab a monster. As long as you run kind of the right number of monsters, usually this will hit. It does feel really bad when it whiffs, but a lot of times this will hit, especially in our deck. We're running a pretty good amount of monsters, so this rarely whiffs. At first, I had her as a 3-of, then I cut her back to 2. Her other ability, too, where she can turn a monster into a 7K, you can do some pretty tricky stuff with, especially since we don't have a ton of monsters that activate on their own. We have a lot of monsters that just kind of sit there, so this will help in letting those monsters kind of attack if you don't have other cards to make usage out of those monsters that are kind of just there. And then we have Gaudus. This is a card that's new to Opus 7. He's insanely strong right now. Probably argument for one of the best dark cards in the game. Just all of his effects are really, really good. And in this deck, especially because we can recur our monsters with him, it makes him insanely good. At worst, he's going to trade with something because he's going to deal 8k from his power and then reduce by 5 on the way out. So he's going to kill a 13k if that has to be possible. Also, you could just get the last card out of your opponent's hand. Maybe they've been holding something that, you know, you've seen them hold, and they've had to play to 1 card in their hand. You can just make them get rid of 1. It is random, so if they have 3 cards in their hand, you can get kind of lucky and maybe hit the 1 card that, you know, might give you a problem later down the line. But a lot of times you're going to use this guy just to recur monsters, and he's going to be really good for that. And then next we have Porum. She EX Burst lets you look at the top 3 cards of your deck and grab 1. That's going to be really good in a deck that runs 3 colors. It's going to allow us to get the card we need at the time more efficiently than, say, like Layla Viking. When I first built this deck, I had 2 and 2 split between Layla and Viking, and it was okay. you know, it really was only better than Porum, to be honest, in the situations where I ran up against someone else's Leyland Viking, and it kind of let me deal with Fanfrit and things like that better. But in a deck where I'm kind of need more slots in order to run the monsters I want to run, in order to run the color fixing that I want to run, I decided to go with Porum. And I think in the current meta, if you're not running 3 Layla, 3 Viking, if you're trying to do some weird split between Layla and Viking, I feel like Porum's just in a better place right now. Also, she's a burst, and also her last ability can be very good too, to shut off things like Star Sybil, like Miner, any kind of action ability that your opponent wants to use. Now, they have to be really careful. Once Porum's been out for a turn, you know, they have to play around this. And anything that breaks itself is part of the cost. Like, if you don't play around Porum when you do that, and I Porum the action ability, that thing is still broken. It's still going to the break zone. And that can be backbreaking if the opponent doesn't realize it. It's very similar to, like, I guess, White Mage in that sense, where White Mage kind of stops your opponent from using these recursion effects. And if your opponent does recur something and forgets about White Mage, it's very punishing. So Porum is very good in that sense, and that's why I like her as a 3-of in this deck. Then we have Opus 4 Raubon. This guy's basically a summon in the deck. He's not going to live. We don't run any things like Adamantoise or stuff like that to try to keep him alive. He's just going to come in, he's going to deal 9k, and he's going to leave. That's really it. He's just there to kill something. He's 4 CP, deal 9k to a guy. If I were to cut the 1 Leo above, I'd probably put in a 3rd one of this card just to have 3 as an option to cast to kill big things. Cards that are kind of annoying for him to deal with, it's worth it to note. Noctis can be a bit annoying because if you spend 4 to try to deal damage to Noctis, Noctis can kind of just spend 4 to negate it. But sometimes that's in your favor. It just depends on the situation. So Raubon's great in a deck where you can't run summons. I mean, he's always been good in these kind of Cleone-style decks that run Earth. Now we have the most important card in the deck. Sarah is what makes this deck function. Sarah is what wins you games. Generally, you can win the game off the back of 1 Sarah. A lot of times, it's going to take you 2. And then the 3 is just there to make sure that you see it every game, to make sure you get to 2 every game, because you probably will have to. And then to make sure, like, if you have to discard it early or something, you still have that chance of seeing 1 to 2 Sarahs. But a lot of times, I'm telling you, one of these things will win you the game. Just make sure that you save it for the right moment. Don't play it unless you have to. You don't want her to be the target. Like, you don't want her to sit there and then she ends up getting removed unless you can afford to have her removed. Like, this is your game-winning card. So when she comes into play, she's going to dull as many characters as you have Category 13 characters. So Sarah might be the only 13 forward that we run, but we run almost all 13 monsters and a few 13 backups. So a lot of times you're going to dull their entire board. Not only that, but you're going to be able to dull 2 active 13 characters and choose 1 forward and freeze it. This is going to make your monsters that you play later that we'll talk about way more useful. Even though they're not doing anything once they come out, once Sarah hits the board, they're going to start freezing things. If you have other ways to dull things, they're going to keep freezing things. A lot of times a Sarah that goes unchecked can just keep 2 things frozen in this deck pretty much infinitely. So she's pretty insane here. That's why I'm running 3. Don't cut below 3, in my opinion. This is what the deck's built around. After that, we have Gal. Gal is pretty much in any monster deck that's going to run water. Again, like if it's monster focused, he's going to let us bring back any monster of cost 2 when he comes into play, and he's going to get really big as long as we control a lot of monsters. Also, Rage is really good in this deck because we have monsters that don't do much once they hit the field. They kind of just sit there. So we can use our extra Gals to just straight up break forwards if you want. But a lot of times I find myself, if Gal breaks, fine, I'll just play another Gal, get a monster back, get that value train going, and it's really great. So yeah, not much more to say about Gal. He's just really good in monster decks, and a lot of our monsters cost 2 or less, so we're going to keep bringing him back with Gal. And then lastly, on the forwards, we have Kefka. This guy has been pretty great for me. Sometimes I want to play 3, but he costs 8, so it's a little bit pricey there. The nice thing is this guy has an alternate cross. I can break 3 monsters if I have to, or break 2 monsters and maybe like a small forward, and then play him to just straight up break something that's going to be really annoying for me to deal with. A lot of times that might be like Dottaluma or, you know, Cam, because it's kind of hard for Cam to pick what colors he wants to deal with. Like, he doesn't want to be dulled by ice, so sometimes he's going to pick ice. You know, Earth is going to give us our break and our damage effects, so he doesn't want to really get hit by those. And then sometimes a Cal special can hit Cam. But again, Kefka's just here. He's just removal. But he's removal that kind of stays out after. I find myself a lot of times hard casting this guy just from 4 backups, usually, instead of breaking my monsters, because you want to keep that monster filled up. But if you can afford to break the monsters and then play kind of something else behind it, that's also great too. He's very versatile in that way. But again, yeah, this is just removal for you to have, and he's great for that. So now we're getting into the monsters. First up, we have Cleone. Like I said earlier, Cleone is what allows us to not run summons in the deck. It's going to automatically pop as soon as a summon gets cast. It's going to go to the break zone, and it's going to draw you a card. Not really much more to say. You want to have this out all the time. You want to stop your opponents from also casting summons. Any deck that only runs kind of big, heavy, costed summons, like say an Earth, Wind, that runs their Phoenixes, it's going to be really hard for them to get rid of Cleone kind of efficiently, because their Diabolus is going to get canceled. They're not going to get to untap their backups. Their 7 CP Phoenix is going to get canceled. They're not going to get their forward back or do the damage. It's pretty crippling for them. It basically makes them play without summons for the most part, or cast a ton of CP on a summon, and then it just gets canceled and does nothing. So like I said, you want to keep this out all the time. It is worthy to note that if you Kefka this as part of Kefka's cost, alternate cost, you still get to draw the card, which is nice. So say you have like a second Cleone, you just play it, and then you pop everything but the other Cleone to keep one out to protect people. Kefka will draw you that card. These do all trigger at the same time though, so if you have multiple Cleones out, that's not protecting you from multiple summons. They just play one summon and they're going to pop all your Cleones. So you want to really try to only have one out, unless you really need to have 2 out for Sarah or for something like that, or for that Kefka instance that I just talked about. Otherwise, try to just keep one out. You just have to keep one out, but it needs to stay out all the time. Next monster we have is the Opus 7 Goblin. This card is pretty ridiculous in this deck, to be honest. It lets us search out our Cleones. Let's just search out any of these monsters listed here, just for the cost of 2 and break. If you have Mira out, this costs 1. You're going to break it, you're going to dull Mira, you're going to get another one of these and a monster. So it's going to get an insane amount of value. And the last ability to discard from your hand could maybe help you against some Vikings or something that are trying to pressure you early in attack or bait you into playing into a Fanfrit and whatnot like that. But other than that, you're probably just going to cast this. The cool thing too with this card is it lets you color fix. All you have to do is have access to Ice CP, and you can go get Water CP, or you can go get Earth CP, because we're playing 3 colors worth of monsters. And that is really relevant. Sometimes I've broken this to go get my Earth monsters to play a Shantoto or something like that. So just have to be cognizant of that. All the things you can do with this monster is great in this deck, and like just being able to get your other monsters is good enough. Then we have Schrodinger. This might be the best monster in this deck for what it does. Number 1, it's a 13 monster, so it counts for Sarah. You can set this up many ways with this deck to kind of look at the top card of your deck. What you're really wanting to hit is a backup in most situations. You hit a forward, it's nice, you get to draw it. You hit a monster, it's a little bit more situational. Sometimes, maybe if they play like a solo forward like a Cam or something, and you hit that monster, it's great. They have to return that Cam to their hand and replay it again. Or any kind of like high-costed thing that they're trying to kind of use as a wall. But the problem is the opponent gets to choose which character gets bumped to their hand, so that's why it's not quite as good. However, if you hit a backup in this deck, you can do some really nutty stuff. If you have another Podcat in the break zone and you hit a backup off of a Podcat, you can get another Podcat from your break zone, put it in your hand, play that Podcat, flip again. It's going to be the same backup. You're going to get another character card. This Podcat basically just drew you 2 cards from your break zone. Also, if we have a backup I'll talk about later, you're going to get to draw a card. And you can get some really nutty turns where Schrodinger nets you 4 cards, and then you play a Sarah. You know, like, it's just really nuts. I can't really say much more about this card. It's just insane in this deck. It makes me want to run it in more decks where I can kind of manipulate the top of the deck, but it's really hard to find deck space in those. But for here, we're not running summons, so we can afford to run these monsters. Then we have Swamp Monk, another 13 monster, so it counts for Sarah again. And for 1 ice, they're just going to, basically be a snow that's a 5k. You'd be surprised how relevant the 5k is. It forces those Earth Wind decks to have multiple Cactuars or Semi plus Cactuar out and the Dodaluma in order to kill this. He can't just use 1. However, if Dodaluma is the only forward out, you have to choose them. That doesn't feel super great. But a lot of times you can dull Dodaluma through other means, maybe with forwards that you have on the board before you activate this and swing for game. And with the new backup snow out, this guy's going to attack and dull 2 things, which is pretty primo. It's pretty great. At first, I had green dragons in here, and I swapped them out for this because green dragons don't count towards Sarah, and this does. And this also kind of does more at the cost of costing ice instead of colorless. And then the last monster is Gigas. I severely underrated this card when I reviewed it when the set came out. This guy is an insane blocker. Just that he can activate for free is really, really good. Just to be a 9k blocker, that's kind of hard to deal with because he has that kind of monster immunity. He also costs 4, so he gets around things like Ramu. Ramu can't just like straight break him, right? Like it's only going to deal with 7k once I activate him. His kind of drawback is that if he attacks, you know, he doesn't untap during your next active phase, but a lot of times you're just not attacking with this guy at all. However, you can do some cute tricks with Realm. You can activate him with Realm, make him a 7k attack, and then when they block, turn him into a 9k, and then his trigger wouldn't have triggered because he had already attacked. So that makes him a 9k for free that will untap during the next, you know, your next active phase. So you can get kind of cute there, but a lot of times, like I said, this guy's not going to attack unless it's for the game, or unless it's for a point of damage that you really think you needed to get in, and you can maybe afford to lose your 9k blocker for a turn. So our backup list is kind of long for this this deck list. A lot of one-ofs, a lot of kind of situational cards that you kind of want to be careful about how you form your backup line in this deck. It can get a little tricky because a lot of these you can't break, so you have to kind of be cognizant of what matchup you're playing, what backups you need to get down, what backups you can play in every matchup, and so on and so forth. And then pretty much once you get some of them down, the other ones you pretty much have to pitch at that point in time unless you have a way to kind of somehow get rid of them. So we're going to kind of speed around this a little bit because there are a lot of backups, and I just want to touch on like why they're in here. A lot of them are very matchup specific. So first we have Astro. At first I ran 2 of this card in here and I cut back to 1. I still really like this card. I think you could run 2 if you wanted to. You could probably cut the Oracle out. This combos really well with another backup I'll talk about in a second. This combos really well with Schrodinger. Anything that kind of looks at the top card of your deck, and now you know it's a backup. It lets you get an extra card every turn. The reason I cut back to 1 is because sometimes you can't get to abuse it as much as you want every game. But in the games where you don't need these other matchup-specific backups, you can play this and be fine and get you some extra card advantage out of the deal, which is just great. Then we got Sid Woff, probably one of the most important backups in the deck. I would love to fit 3 of this in here if I could, but I've cut back down to 2 just to make room for some other backups that I needed to make room for. He can't be broken, so you can't Archer him, which is kind of nice, I guess, in the current meta where you're seeing a lot of Archer and whatnot. But the last ability lets you break him yourself, and then you can get a monster of 2 or less, doesn't matter the color, put it back into play. So a lot of times you're going to recur your Cleone. If it gets broken, you're going to recur your Potcats to get more value off your Potcats. You know, you can bring back your Swamp Monks, all that kind of stuff. It's great for that. You can only use this ability during your turn. You just got to remember that you can't kind of, you know, if they break your Cleone, you can't bring back another Cleone. That would be really, really good if you could. But sadly, you can't do that. Anyways, he's insane. You're going to play him early, forget about him for a little while, and then late in the game, he's going to come into play, and he's going to do some really nutty stuff for you. And then the next backup is Green Mage. I really like this as a meta call right now. Again, canceling action abilities is great, and being able to do it just by having the backup upright is pretty amazing. It's going to let you stop things like White Mage that try to White Mage when you gal your monsters back and everything like that, or your Sid Woffs. It's going to allow you to stop just a lot of really pesky action abilities like Star Sybil that I talked about earlier, like Miner. You just have to make sure that you keep this upright. This card is pretty cuttable, but I do like the fact that it can break itself. If you do decide to cut this, I would recommend that you kind of find something else that you can break. And the nice thing is it's water card that I can break, and there's not a lot of water card backups that are breakable. A lot of them kind of do stuff, and then they're there. That's it. Done. But this is one of the few water backups that comes out, and then it allows me to break it to make room for other backups later in the game if I have to. Then we have the new Oracle. This card's great. Again, it lets us color fix because we can look at the top 2 cards of our deck. If it's something we don't like, we just put them both on the bottom. If we like one and not the other, we do 1 and 1. You know, whatnot like that. And you can also use this to set up, again, for Potcat for that Astrologian that I talked about earlier. It just does a lot for the deck. Again, you have to remember, though, once you play this, you can't break it. So you got to be careful between playing this and Astro and matchups where you might need some other backups that we'll talk about in a second. Next up we have Yule. Again, this lets us look at the top card of the deck anytime we want, which is great for things like Potcat again, like Astrologian. You know, At first, I was running a Earth Vanille, the new one, that kind of breaks a dull based on the number. You like call a number, then you look at the top, so it's good for that too. Another thing is this is a 13 character, so it counts for Sarah, and it allows you to dull itself to freeze things as long as Sarah's out on the board. One thing to note: don't play this against Wind if you know that they have archers in their deck, and don't play this against Wind if you don't know if they have archers or not, because you don't want to milk 10 cards. You will lose if you have to mill 10 cards. You can't really afford to mill those cards. Games are going to go long, and 10 cards is going to kill you. So you just got to be really careful, know your matchup, know if you're able to play this or not, and know if you even need to play this or not. You might want to play some other sticky things later, and you might not need this for ICP or that extra 13 character. But it is good. It does things that we like in the deck, so that's why it's in here. Then next we have Epitaph. He's a really good searcher in this deck. He's going to get us Leo, he's going to get us Mira, he's going to get us Gaudus. A lot of times you're going to search for Gaudus, and then at that point your RCP is online for Shantoto, which is all that matters. Again, you got to be careful if you play him, then that kind of limits you from playing your other searchers that we'll talk about in a second, because once this is down, it's not breakable. It's just a source of Earth CP, and that's it. Then we have the Solid Empire Sid. Again, he's going to search out of 6 characters, so that's Gao, that's Realm, that's Kefka. That's a pretty good amount of forwards to be able to search. It can search your removal in Kefka if you need to, or if you need Earth CP, it can search out Gao or Realm and get you some Water CP if you have to, or, play Gao to get a monster back, or maybe you just want to play Realm on the cheap and get you a monster off the top of your deck. It can do that too. It's just really good, but again, like I said, if you played... You want to try to keep yourself to only play 1 searcher a game unless you really feel like you have to play 2. Because if you play 2, you're going to lock yourself out of some other backups that you might want to play later in the game. So just be careful of that. If you play this, you probably won't end up playing Epitaph or Mach 13-2, which is a searcher we'll go over in a second. So, you just got to prioritize your backups a lot. Then we got Minwoo, another backup that kind of comes and goes in the meta. Right now, I just kind of like the fact that if I play this, it kind of makes Earthwind have to play differently. Which is a matchup, I think we might be kind of even on anyways. And if they play like the Phoenix build, I think it's really good for us. So you can kind of play this and then kind of lock them out of a lot of things. However, they do have Archer, they do have Hecaton Chair at their disposal, so, it might not be that great. It's also good against the Mono Wind Ping deck as well. So just kind of, again, it's a matchup dependent thing. It's also a card you could cut if you really feel like you want to cut it. I just like to have it there as an answer if I need to play it in the matchup. Then we have Mog 13-2. Again, pretty self-explanatory. It searches out your Sarah. That's really it. That's the only target in the deck, but it is something that you need every game, like I said. So if you're forced to discard a Sarah early on, maybe Mono Ice force you to discard through Sephiroth, you can use this to go get another copy of Sarah, because, like I said, a lot of games you're going to want to see 2. Sometimes you could win the game off the back of 1. But you don't want to really risk that. You want to make sure that you can play two Sarahs a game, and that's really what's going to allow you to win. And so this kind of increases our ability to do that. Then we have Miner. This is kind of a recent addition to the deck. It's okay. Again, it's pretty cuttable. It's just nice to have an early option to kind of pitch maybe a backup and an Earth card to get that backup back and kind of set myself up early to play a Shantoto later. You will play a Shantoto every game, so Earth CP is very important. Shantoto is going to easily win you games. Also, the nice thing about this is it's a breakable Earth backup, so once we use it to play Shantoto, we can then break it to get back our Gals, get back our Sarahs, and things like that. In this place, I was running a Devout, but Devout was a bit more pricier because although Miner also says it costs 4, it really doesn't if you play it at the right time. And, you might have to put extra into it later in order to get the forward back, and it's not instant. You have to kind of play it afterward, but it's better earlier is what I'm trying to say, basically. So that's why it's in here. I think you could cut this for a Devout, though, if you feel like you need that kind of faster forward back into play, and that will also get you back pretty much everything that's important. This will allow you to get back Gao and Kefka and a couple other things that Devout wouldn't allow you to, but Devout will get you back most things. Then we have Snow, another card that's going to win you games. You play this guy. You want to play this guy every game because it's going to allow you to attack through for damage and kind of chip him away until you get Sarah out and then you end the game. Also, it's going to make Sarah kind of be lights out when you play her because then now you can dull and freeze things on the every turn basically. It lets your Swamp Monk double down and dull 2 things when it attacks. It just does so much, and it's also a 13 character, so it counts for Sarah. You're able to dull this plus something else to freeze something with Sarah. you're going to want to play this every game if you can. That's why it's a 2 of, and only a couple backups in this entire deck are 2 ofs that you can see. And those are the ones you want to play every game. So you got to kind of make sure you always have room for snow. You don't need it early. It just has to come down late. But just make sure that you have room for snow up, to put them into play for that turn that allows you to swing out. Then we have Yuta EX. Again, she's kind of a tech card for me as well. Against decks like Urianger Mill or things that are trying to take me into the long game. This can kind of hinder their ability to recur things from the break zone, or maybe I'm playing Golbez or something like that. This card's very cuttable. If you want to lower your backup curve, you could cut it if you're having trouble. But I just kind of like it. Again, kind of the same vein of Minwoo, is it lets me play more versatile game, and maybe I'm trying to cover too many matchups, and you could see those cards and you could cut those cards to kind of streamline the deck a little bit more. But I feel like a deck like this, you want to have those little subtle advantages over a lot of decks that can maybe give you trouble, and that's what this is here for. And last but not least is Shantoto. Again, I mean, most decks that I play tend to run this card. It's still the best board wipe in the game, and it color fixes. What more do you want? It's great for that. Again, you're going to cast this every game. You're going to need to board wipe every game. I can't stress that enough. Do not cut below 3 Shantoto. I tried to run it with 2. It was awful. You need her every game. You don't have a way to search her out, so you got to see her. And if you don't, it feels really terrible. So that's basically the deck. Give it a try if you like it. It is pretty hard to play, and you can get punished for the little small mistakes, but it is very annoying to play against, trust me. Once you get to the point where you can kind of lock down these forwards for 2, 3, 4 turns at a time, and it's 4s maybe that they want to replay, like you can lock down a Renoa, the legendary, so that they can't, keep swinging with her to threaten to bring her back with Devout to bounce another forward. Things like that. You can keep Cloud of Darknesses locked down, so once it gets its value, they're not allowed to play another Cloud of Darkness. So just things like that are really good. And then again, like, you're just gonna usually win the game over the course of 1 to 3 turns after you play Sarah, and that's how you're gonna win. Again, I like monster decks a lot, and so that's why I built this deck specifically, was because I wanted to play another monster deck again. And I feel like these 3 colors are maybe the best monster deck you can put together right now, but maybe Wind is still good enough to put in here as far as monsters go. So yeah, I mean, that's my take on 13 3-color monsters. Give it a try. Let me know what you think. Like, favorite, subscribe, and hopefully I'll put out more of these deck techs in the future, and hopefully it won't just be me, it'll be the other returner family that you can see, show you some decks and tell you some decks that they like too. So with that being said, see you next time. Peace.